Okay, so this week we are in Chutz La'aretz. It's Bahalaischa and Eretz Yisroel Shlach. So what we're going to do is we're going to do one day we're going to do a Maamar from Shlach, and the next day we're going to do from Tafshin Yud Aleph 1951, and then the next day we're going to do a Sicha from 1950, so the early years. So we get both the Hiskashrus Sicha, although this Maamar is itself very much Hiskashrus. The first Maamar Shlach, the Rebbe said, Shabbos Baruch Tamas Tafshin Yud Aleph. But we're going to go back and forth. So we'll try to get over the next 2 weeks. We could finish both the Sicha and the Maamar of Shlach Tafshin Yud 1950 and 1951. Let's bring up the text. Again, this is a very Skashrus Maamar as well. We're going to learn afterwards also the Sicha on this Maamar when we finish the Maamar. It's very sharp Sicha. The Rebbe says like this: Shlach Lecha Anashim v'Yasuru es Eretz Canaan. So this is again the beginning of this week's parsha in Eretz Yisroel. Hashem tells Moshe to send spies to check the land. Here's Rashi, famous Rashi, that says Lecha L'Daitcha, meaning to say that Moshe has to decide if he wants to send. It's up to you to send spies. I'm not commanding you. If you want to send them. At the end, he sent the spies. Moshe sent the spies to spy, check out the land. Muchach is understood clearly that he felt you should send spies. God said, you decide if you want to. So if he sent, means he decided it was necessary. Although later when Moshe tells the story in Devarim, he tells it that the Jewish people demanded the spies, you came to me. Let's send spies. So seemingly it was initiated by the people, not by Moshe himself. And it made sense to me, and I sent the spies, Moshe says. Why did Moshe agree to send the spies? Like a person, sell me something. When a person asks someone to sell something, there's a kind of psychology where the person is comfortable to sell and has not holding back, not kind of trying to make any conditions or to withhold anything. So it gives confidence to the buyer that there's nothing that's going to come up later that's going to disrupt the sale. He's very confident to sell. So too, Miyad Omer Lai told Ma'ascha, so then give money. Here's the money. Take the money. I'll buy the thing, because it's the confidence the person feels, has no issue selling it, meaning to say that he's confident that it's a good product. So too, Ani Menasehu Mi'ata, Afani Haidiasi Lidivrechem Shem Tachsur Moshe felt that maybe the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu when the Jewish people said send spies, Moshe said sure, we'll send spies. That by Moshe being confident to send the spies, that alone, they would say, okay, it's not necessary, we trust you. But then you didn't go back. You didn't say, okay, we trust you, don't send the spies. You demanded, when I said yes, you said, okay, send the spies. Means from the Gemara, it seems, the Resolve from Chazal, where is it from 4, is Sifri. It's Moshe really didn't want to send, but he agreed to send only the Jews asked, and he figured that if the Jews would see Moshe is not hiding anything, he has no problem to send spies, they would go back. But they didn't go back. They didn't go back on their demand to send spies. It means Moshe himself wasn't for sending the spies. But then when they didn't back down, so he had to keep his word. He sent the spies. But at the end of the day, even according to the Sifri, at the end of the day, God, that's between Moshe and the Jewish people, so to say. God didn't tell Moshe to work a reverse psychology on the people. God told Moshe, you have to decide. It's up to you. How you move, and it's clear. If Moshe totally didn't agree with the idea, and it didn't make sense to him at all, and he was very against it, he wouldn't have put the Jewish people in a position of reverse psychology. He wouldn't have sent them. At the end of the day, when he did send them, we must say, at the end of the day, Moshe did feel it wasn't a good idea to send Meraglim, notwithstanding how this Afri explains it. Now that's a question. It's wondrous Why did Moshe feel the right thing was to send spies? The Gemara teaches us tractate of brachas. Al pasuk Adi Abraham Hashem Adi Abraham Kuzikunisa. Also, the idea is brought down in Tzaddik. It says Adi Abraham twice about the Jewish people talking about the Geula, the redemption. Adi Abraham Chavaya Zubia Rishon. The first time the Jewish people came into Eretz Yisroel, Shabal B'mei Yehoshua, they became in with big miracles, became in with big a shturim, like say a storm. And Adi Abraham Zukanisa, another time the Jewish people could come in, Zubi Yeshnia, the second time the Jewish people were going to come into Eretz Yisroel, Shaul Begolis, Bava B'mei Ezra, the time of Ezra, that there was also going to come in miraculous. And then the Gemara Saita says that whether it was they didn't come in with the numbers because of the sin, that it's a complicated Gemara, but we see clearly that it was supposed to be the Bia Rishniya, which is with Ezra, was supposed to be like the Bia Rishayna of Yeshua, which was miraculous. When the Jewish people came back with Ezra, it was going to be a restart after the second destruction of the first temple. Before the building of the second temple would be as miraculous as they came with in Yeshua. Rashi, they would come in not the way they came in at the end, through Nehemiah and Ezra and Zerubbabel and all the sending and having to convince people, but they would have come in with the Yad Rama, with a strong hand. We're not going to explain what happened over there. We're not going to explain what that really means, because the Gemara inside the seemingly is questionable. The Gemara says, if not for the sin, then we would have come in Yad Rama. But the reason why you weren't there in the first place was the sin. The whole reason why there was a destruction in the first temple. So seemingly there's different levels of sin, and maybe the sin was that after the hate of going into Galus, they sinned by not wanting to go back to Eretz Yisroel. We know that it was very hard for Ezra to convince the people to come back. So, but the point is that we see when the Jewish people came in with Yehoshua, they came in via drama with a strong hand. The Jewish people came into Eretz Yisroel with Yehoshua. They came in miraculously in a strong hand. If that's the case, what does this have to do with our topic here? That if the Moshe Rabbeinu was going to be the one to bring the Jewish people in, had he not sinned with the Meraglim, which led to the other sins that caused Moshe not to go in, the Maamar Riva, etc., because they would have gone in right away, right after the spies went. So we see it would have been even more miraculous than Yeshua. So why would Moshe think it's necessary to send spies? Spies you send when you don't have the confidence. When you're coming in with the confidence of miracles, and your drama. Why didn't you send spies? Had the Jewish people entered the land, Eretz Yisroel with Moshe, when did he send the spies? The spies were in this, not 24 months later, but in the second year. They arrived back 40 days on Tisha B'Av. So we're talking about Rosh Chodesh, the end of the Sivan of the second. So it was a year and a month, really, the second year from when they left Mitzrayim. So Ilu Haisak Nis Eretz Yisrael Moshe Moshe Shari Ma'asim Ragam Ha'Bishnas Hashenis L'Tzeis Mitzrayim Hainu L'Fnei Achet Meimar Yuva, before the sin of the water where Moshe was told he can't go into the land. Shazay in the first of Israel, Moshe would have went in right away and through Moshe. It would be for sure with a miracle and with a strong hand. We know, as the Gemara tells us, and we know from the story of the Egel, that by the time Yeshua led the Jewish people to Eretz Yisroel, it was with the angel, not Hashem himself. When it says Atavasi, the Malach says in the vision that Yeshua has, with the take your shoes off and they're standing with the sword, that whole vision that he has of the angel, he says, Atavasi, I only come now. But the Malach wasn't here in Moshe's days. Why? When God wanted to send the Malach in Parshas Kisisa, Moshe says, no, we want you to lead us. And if nevertheless, notwithstanding the fact that Yeshua went into the land only through an angel, nevertheless it was miraculous, the splitting of the Yarden, of the Jordan River, and all other miracles, Yericha, etc., and with a great hand, had Moshe led the Jewish people in, and it would not be with an angel. Imagine the miracles would have happened. How the Jewish people entered the land with Moshe Rabbeinu. Apis any movement again, so it's not understood. Lama hoise b'daita shemayshul shlach meragel. Why did Moshe think it was a good idea to send spies? Ari kasher echnisa le'aretz ya'idei nes gadol. Ein nafkamina chazaka yehu ha'rafa. Moshe is sending spies to see how strong the people are if they're weak. Rafa is like a light grip on the land. Do they feel confident to be? Do they have to be living only in camps where they need each other to keep themselves safe, or do they feel confident to live alone out in the woods? You know, when you're living out in the woods, you have to be safe. You have to feel that I live in such a safe area that although I don't have the protection of the city, I'm not concerned. Moshe is trying to see the level of confidence the people's had, meaning to say Moshe felt that there wasn't that he was also lacking, because he needed to know how strong they were. What if they're coming with the miracle with Hashem? What if stormed through? What's the concern? What's the need to send spies? So why would Moshe, again, what's the question there? At the end of the day, is that God said, Shlach Lecha Anashim, with all the explanation that Moshe says there in the Devarim that you came to me. At the end of the day, if Moshe didn't agree, he wouldn't have sent. They weren't going to manipulate Moshe to send spies. And the fact that Moshe agreed to send spies means to say that he felt that was the right thing to do. And the question is what? The Rebbe says, if you've been behaving, will understand this. Base, beer, clause, in what does it mean to go to Eretz Yisroel? Why would they go into Eretz Yisroel? What's the idea of Eretz Yisroel? It says, if you understand what Eretz Yisroel is, you understand the idea of the spies. Until the Jewish people went into the land, there wasn't the idea of the physicality of the mitzvos. There was a physicality more than the fathers in the desert, but not the real key of the mitzvos, the action, the mitzvos that the Jewish people were able to keep in Eretz Yisroel. That's going to be explained. The Afshigan b'yosef midrahisa and Hagal b'Torah. Even though, of course, they kept the Torah, so they had mitzvahs. You weren't able to perform all the mitzvahs, you know clearly. It means when the Jewish people come to the land, over and over and over again, these mitzvahs kick in. Even Pesach, they only did one Pesach because they had no obligation until they came into the land. When did the action mitzvahs come into effect? It's we went there to Israel. The whole idea of Shabbos, the 39 Melachos acts. When Shabbos, the Tana, the Sidur, the Pasnak. What's Shabbos all about? First, we look, how do you make bread? You have to plant, you have to plow, and you have to grow, and you have to plant, you water, and you have to cut. And you have to grind, and you have to make it into cook food. You have to make a fire. Everything. The Shabbos is around Pas. They didn't make bread in the desert. Rak mitzvah, the Tana Sidur the Pasna. A chodesh as a reya, a koitzer, plowing, sowing, cutting. Shekol zeh lo shaykh b'yos midbar. This was part of the midbar. Shari ochlu lechem in Ishmael. They had man. Beinin zen is chadish b'vayim la'aretz. This only started when they came to the land. That's when they started to work the land, but they did not have man, and therefore that's where Shabbos kind of kicks in. Shabbos is taking what you do in the week is what comes holy on Shabbos, but they weren't doing that in the week. Not that they didn't have these obligations on Shabbos; they weren't allowed to be Mekayishim. See, clearly, a person cut that what he was put to death. But the mitzvahs themselves weren't performed on the level of the way they performed in Eretz Yisroel. So the question is why. What does this mean? What is the idea? What is so special? Why did Hashem want us to do mitzvahs that are in action in Gashmis? That we should make the bread. All the things that come with Eretz Yisroel. Eretz Nesheves. It's a famous idea that Rebbe talks about. It explains in the Kutei Torah. There's two types of tzaddik. We learned this in the Kutei Torah and Shabbos. Parshas Shmini. The V'yasir Mishar Haba. There's the Tzaddik, which is like the fish, which we learned is fast, moving, unassuming, that can perform all the mitzvahs. Like it talks about the Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, as we're going to say in a second. And there's the Shar Haba, there's the passionate Tzaddik on the ground. Tzaddikim shein b'bchinas levyasin. There's the tzaddiks that are like the levyasin. We'll explain in detail. Two lashon is chavris. Levyasin from the word levi, levia, to connect. Like that's why Leah called Levi, because now my husband's going to be connected. He's going to accompany me. What's the idea of Levia? It's spiritual connection. The connection of the tzaddik of the Levyasin is a spiritual connection. It's all about the ruchnis, it's spirituality. It's a fish. Like a fish is hidden. These are hidden souls. The dugmas and Evrahim Shabiyam, like the creations of the sea, and also they're constantly connected to their source. It's something that has a total consciousness of spirituality. You can't take the fish. We're talking about fishes. Well, the Maamar talks about fishes that leave the land, the water, and go to the land, like reptiles. But in general, the fish of sea fish are fish that need to be connected to the source at all times. It's mainly about spiritual. To make unifications on Yainu. The Alter Rebbe explains in the Kutei Torah Shmini. Dugmal is a Kamashbi. He brings the whole example of Shim Bar Yochai, that although he was in the cave for 13 years and he couldn't perform the mitzvahs, he performed them spiritually. When Rashbi and his son Elazar was in the cave for 13 years. Common mitzvahs, there's many mitzvahs they couldn't perform. They had no yayin, they had no matzah, they had no esrog, lulav, no sukkah. After, who knows if they had tefillin? The Hashem mitzvah you put mitzvah because they were an oinus. Ki oinus, the sakonis nefashos, had they gone out to try to find it, even their wives wouldn't have allowed to know where they lived. Like we learned in the Gemara, in the story in the Gemara. So they were not obligated. It was dangerous for them. They keep mitzvahs. You can't say that for 13 years Rashbi wasn't able to do a mitzvah. We have to say. The Alter Rebbe explains it in the Maamar, the Torah. He did it spiritually. The Torah says, although the Rizal was not in a cave for 13 years, and the Rizal we don't know is that he didn't have the ability of big Ashmis to perform, but he was so spiritual that he mainly operated on a spiritual level. And there's a footnote in the Kutei Torah from the Tzemach Tzaddik, the third Rebbe Chabad, that he adds, so too, just like the Arizal and Rashbi, the Baal Shem Tov also was like the fish Tzaddik, which was basically way more spiritual than physical and material. The Inyan Shor HaBor, Hainu Tzaddikim Shoav Dasim, Ubegashim Kiyum Mitzvos Ma'asos. And the Tzaddik of the Shor HaBor is like the oxes on the land, in the open, is the passionate Tzaddik who performs the mitzvah. Begashim is physically. As the Alter Rebbe explains. That although the ox, the tzaddik of the ox, needs to be elevated by the hidden tzaddik, by the tzaddik of the fish, as the Alter Rebbe explains over there, that's why there's going to be, when Mashiach comes, there's going to be the battle between the Shor HaBor and the Levyasin, and the Levyasin is going to slaughter Limshach, he's going to elevate the Shor HaBor to the level of the fish. And that's why also it's going to use his fin. The Alter Rebbe asks, how could he use a fin? It's jagged because it's going to be such an elevation, it can't be so fast. But nevertheless, he's in the Shor HaBor is going to be elevated by the Levyasin. But in the beer, the Alter Rebbe explains, that there's something to say about the tzaddik who could actually perform the mitzvah. Begashmis in its physicality, not just spiritually. Shor HaBor. You want a lot of wheat. You need the strength of the ox. It's the strength of the ox that creates something substance, the tfuah, the grain. You have a lot of strength. The ox tzaddik is like the ox that could push the plow and make a lot of grain. Which goes to like we know that the animals carried. There's no fish on the Merkava. It's all animals in the dry land. And because of their strength, they're able to carry the share of Hashem, the Kisakavit. They have enough strength to carry the chair. And the fact that they carry the chair, they also get carried. The lashon over there in the is noises to menusais. They carry and they get carried. Like a horse on a buggy carries. It's the speed of the horse, but it's the discipline of the rider that allows for the horse to actually accomplish something. Just let a horse run, it's just going to run. It's only if the horse is disciplined and carries and listens to the rider, so both it benefits both the rider and the horse. It's not just the bread that a person's alive. It's the word of Hashem that's comes from the avodah, the word of Hashem, this world that's in the physicality. The kal mighty be lechem. And in the bread that the person works to get is the word of God, and that's something to say about that word of God in the bread. And the life, the godliness in the bread. Why does the person need the bread? That's the idea of the animal carrying the kise, the cover, this chair. The chair represents the Adam. Why the famous question Chassidus asks, why can a person live? Why does a person have to eat? Why can a person sustain themselves from the utterance Nasa Adam? The reason why we need to eat is because there's the Dvar Hashem that's in the lechem. That's the idea of the ox carrying the chair. In Nasa Adam, in the utterance of let's make man. So it's explains in Chassidus, as we learned many times, because the ox is strong. And the bread that's all part of the material, the world, the 10 utterances in creation is in a way higher than the utterance in the person. Therefore, the person needs to separate, to elevate, birur, but to take. It's like you know how to find the energy in the spiritual energy in the bread and in the animal, and use that to sustain yourself. Otherwise, you can't stay in the world. You won't live. You won't survive. The kiven shenifel but it fell so low. It comes from such a high source. But it fell in the animal and the bread. There's a movement, not only that. You know the rule, the higher something is, the further it falls. If something looks dark, it's only because the source is so high. The higher something is, the lower it could fall. Therefore, the person, soul, body, connection is dependent on eating. Because they're moving from this, we see by this scheme, mitzvos, and this is the same idea is why it's so important to actually do mitzvahs, because in the physicality, there's that same energy that's much higher than just the spirituality. If a person lives in a spiritual space, you're kind of in like a small circle. If you want to get connected to the bigger space, although yes, it falls low, but it's coming from a high source, and therefore that's why we have to do a mitzvah in action. And with physicality, and take physical things to make a mitzvah, actual sukkah, making a sefer Torah with the hides of an animal, tefillin, etc. Therefore, he says, and therefore, even though it's not enough for them to only do spiritual. The Baal Shem Tov did the mitzvahs, the Arizal did the mitzvahs. The Rashbi couldn't, so he only did it the spiritual. Only Rashbi in his specific situation. Then that God is showing them in his case that he's only supposed to be doing that. But that's only temporary and only for a unique situation. So why do we have to still do the mitzvahs if we're able to do it spiritually? Because at the end of the day, there's something to say about the physicality of doing a physical mitzvah. Right, we're going to stop here. And we're going to learn again as Hashem on Tuesday. Tomorrow we're going to learn strongest kashrus sicha from the Rebbe on Tafshin Yod. And again, between the two, the sicha and the Maamar, we could get half and half throughout the next 2 weeks and be able to finish both the Maamar from Tafshin Yod Aleph with the sicha on it, which is very strong because the Rebbe is going to move in this sicha, in this Maamar, the importance of mitzvos ma'asiyos and why and what does it really means mitzvos ma'asiyos, not just the ma'aseh itself, but even deeper than the machshava dibur ma'aseh of Yehoshua, into the Zayin Midos, into the character, similar to the idea of Halayschel, the 7 parts of the Beinoni. And had Moshe brought us in and we were able to change our character, they fought back, and the Yehoshua was only through the machshava dibur ma'aseh, our thought, speech, and action, our garments. But the idea basically that we come to the importance of the actual mitzvah. And therefore it was very important to Moshe that it comes through a certain way how that happens, and that's why they had to be the spies. We'll see all that, but how the Rebbe takes that, and that's all become at the end of the day. All comes from the koyach of Moshe Rabbeinu. So we shall get to that hopefully in the right time. Thank you for joining.